If you feel like you're in a disadvantage for starting a business, this guest in this episode, David Olds, was laid off from his sales job during the housing market crash. And he also only had $5,000 to his name. And he made $8,000 on his very first wholesale deal and went on to do 1,600 deals and turn his life around. So if you've got limited resources, if you feel like you're down in the dumps, if you feel like now might not be the right time, this episode is going to answer your questions and inspire you to get started getting your first wholesale deal. And if you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, please drop us a review. Those reviews help us make more content to get you over the edge to financial freedom.
The DealMachine REI Podcast. Everything you need to know to get started in real estate investing.
Welcome everyone to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we help you quit your job and get your first real estate wholesaling deal. Today we've got a guest, David Olds, who's actually done 1,600 wholesale deals. And so, David, how did you start? It's hard to picture you having not done a deal, but what was your journey to getting your first deal done?
Man, thank you so much also for having me. I love you guys at DealMachine. It's amazing. But yeah, so when I started, it was over 20 years ago, which seems like a ridiculous thing to say. 20 years is like, it feels like I've had 3 lifetimes. Before I got into investing, I was working in sales, building material sales. But I was living in Florida, like every entrepreneur ever. I bought Rich Dad, Poor Dad and said, I should get into real estate. It's what I really would love to do. And so I found very short story, found a local real estate group and started getting as much education as I could. And we actually, because my wife and I had great jobs, we started rehabbing. So from 2002 to 2009, we were in Central Florida, just buying houses, moving, living in them, buying some other houses. And actually tried wholesaling and could not make it work, weirdly enough. The market crashed. It was terrible. It was a real crash. It wasn't like this little thing that we had, last year. But we both lost our houses. We had the house that we lived in eventually foreclosed on. We moved to Tennessee. And the reason that we moved here was for real estate. There were some things happening in the market here that we realized it was going to be a good place to move and invest. So when we moved here, we actually knew nobody. Like I kind of maybe knew one realtor that we had emailed back and forth with a little bit. So it was, it's like that story on Facebook that you see, the burning the boats thing.
No, I don't know what you mean, actually.
I don't know where people are like, I'm going to go on the Vikings, right? Like when they go to a new land, they would land on shore and burn their boats so that there was no retreat.
Gotcha.
Right. So burning the boats.
You couldn't turn back to Florida.
There was no going back. So that's awesome. I don't recommend that for people with a wife, 2 boys, and 3 fat dogs because you're responsible for them. But when we got here, I tell people if there's like a level where you're broke, we were half of that. We didn't even have enough money to be considered broke. So we were in, we had to figure this out. And originally we came here thinking that we'd want to buy apartment complexes and multifamilies. And if you think back, you guys probably aren't old enough, but to go back to 2009, banks were very busy taking properties back, not lending on new properties. So we had to figure something out. And we, because we had a little idea after all those years of being in the real estate world, back then we knew we had to do marketing. Now in 2009, completely different time from here, right? There's no SMS, there's no batch, there's no prop stream, like none of those things exist. Facebook didn't even exist back then. So you did a couple of things in 2009. You sent yellow letters, you sent Chris Chico's postcard, or you drove for dollars, right? That was it. Like that's how we started. So because we were broke, I was not sending out thousands of postcards, but I was literally getting in my car every single day and driving around with a pad of paper on my armrest and literally up and down streets very slowly, looking to the left, looking to the right, looking for houses that look like they needed some love, right? Maybe boarded up, tall grass, newspapers on the driveway, no curtains so you could see straight through. And I would come home every day with a list of 200 or 300. My wife, who was such a champ, she would sit there at night, from 4 to 10 or whatever, going through the property appraiser's website, typing out and making this Excel list of, mailing addresses. And then she would literally handwrite letters and send out mailers and then postcards. Imagine if we had an amazing app that could do all that for us instantaneously back then, dude. But yeah, that's how we started, was driving for dollars. And I tell people, if I was to lose every single thing today, if Regions, Bank of America wiped out our bank accounts, we lost our team, we lost everything, 100% I would go back to driving for dollars. The only difference is this time I'd have a DealMachine to speed things up a lot. So
amazing. So you had a pretty good corporate job. You were using that money to rehab houses in Florida. So you hadn't even done a wholesale deal yet when you end up losing those houses, because the value of the house went down so much, right? You were kind of underwater, so to speak. You owed more
yeah,
than
it
what the house
dropped
was worth.
over 25% in like 4 months. Like that's
Yeah.
what a real crash is. It was horrific.
All right. So then
Yeah.
you both quit your jobs and moved to Tennessee so that you could do your first wholesale deal.
Well, I mean, we didn't quit. We were let go. I mean, what
Oh,
happened in
gotcha.
Florida at the time, laid off, is the economy in Florida was based on three things. So it's like a three-legged stool. So when the recession happened, the first thing is the housing industry just collapsed, right? So my wife was a purchasing manager for a large custom builder, assistant purchasing manager. So she was out before me, and I was a salesperson for 84 Lumber. Nobody was buying lumber because all those subdivisions just stopped. So no, we were done. We had to go figure something out. So the house that we had, we actually lease optioned for $5,000 down. So that 5,000 is what we had when we moved to Tennessee.
Gotcha. You lease option for $5,000 down. So you only had $5,000 to actually move to Tennessee. Dang, that's crazy. And you had kids and 3 fat dogs.
I did three fat dogs. People laugh when I say that, but it's funny. Like the dogs are as important to you as your kids. But yeah, kind of one of the lessons there is, as much as you flip houses or even wholesale, eventually at the end of the day, like you spend that money and it's gone. So no matter how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we made, during those 6 or 7 years before that, like that money's gone. You're paying bills, you're going on vacations, you're doing all of those things. And you have to have something that's going to give you that recurring revenue, that can, keep paying over time.
So tell us about, what was the first deal that you did in Tennessee and how much did you make
So
on it?
yeah, so and it's a type of deal that I don't like to do. We actually did another lease option. So we were doing a lot of driving for dollars, and like 2 blocks away from this house we had bought sub 2. Well, we had bought a subject 2 house, right? But
Okay,
as far as
what do those
wholesaling,
mean, real quick? What do those mean for
okay,
somebody?
so we had been coming back and forth to Chattanooga because we knew we were moving here. So we had picked up a couple of properties that we were able to buy, right? We purchased the home and we took over the seller's mortgage. So there were 2 of them. One was a duplex. The sellers had moved to Las Vegas and they didn't want to manage, and it was an empty duplex that they had bought as an investment, and they weren't great landlords. That somebody had probably told them, buy a rental property, it'll be great. And so they moved to Las Vegas. The house was just sitting there, so they had it up for sale. So we made them an offer. I think we gave them $10,000 and said, hey, we'll make your payments on this duplex for you, to handle for the balance, right? So let's say it was $50,000. We gave them $10,000 and we just took over that mortgage payment for them. So we bought that one, and then we bought another one that was in a really not a great part of town, and that was the house that we had actually moved into when we first got here. And that was just kind of a whole nother separate nightmare. I had walked through this house maybe 6-8 weeks before, and I don't know if anybody's ever, you walk through a house and you have this, you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be great. And when we finally got here, it was just terrible. Like electric didn't work in half the house. There's no air conditioning. It was 1900s house and not the greatest of areas. And again, I moved my wife, 2 boys, 3 fat dogs into this house, and it was very depressing because I had just left this beautifully remodeled house in Florida. But anyways, we started driving, every day because we knew we had to do something, right? So a lot of times people will ask us, well, how did you do those deals? What made you successful and what made you different from anybody else? I'm like, first off, I'm not smarter than anybody else. Like there's nothing special about me. The only difference is we were absolutely committed to making sure that this worked because I had nothing else. Like literally you have, a family, which, not smart to do what I did with a family. Again, thank goodness my wife is always up for these adventures, but like, you have to pay your bills. You have to feed your kids. You have to put new shoes on your kids, and your dogs like dog cookies, right? So it was the thing, for us, real estate was the only thing that we did, right? I woke up in the morning. It was the first thing I thought about. I went out all day driving for dollars, and I came home and we hand wrote the letters. And then if there was some real estate event, we would go to that, and then we would get up and do the same thing again tomorrow. So we were just single-mindedly focused on making sure that we figured it out, because again, I tried it in Florida once and it didn't work. So, but I knew wholesaling worked, right? There's plenty of people that do it, right? It's a thing. It obviously works. So anyways, driving for dollars, there was this house maybe 3 or 4 blocks away from us. And the people called us off of a handwritten letter that we had sent them. I went over there, and they wanted to sell on financing. So we worked out a deal where we found them a lease option buyer. I think it was like $2,000 down or $2,500 down. We got to keep the $2,500, and the buyer that we put in place was going to make the payments to them with an option to purchase within 2 years. So that was our very first deal. And I don't like assigning lease option deals. I don't think it's a great way to go. But that was our very first deal.
When did you end up doing any like straight wholesale deals?
Yes. Yeah. So again, because, this is maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we've been here. So like literally every day, my wife is sending out 50 to 100 letters or postcards, like every single day. That was where all of our money was going to, was stamps and, copy papers. We were copying stuff. And we're also, as we're driving around, I bought this old beat up Jeep. And, I was driving for dollars because it was a summer. It was June of 2009. And my 2 boys, who were like 12 and 14 at the time, they're jumping out of the back of the car, running up, putting little door hangers on these houses. So we're driving around. The first true wholesale deal I did was the next one. And that was just a vacant house that, somebody called. We talked to them. We went over and looked at the house, made them an offer. They took it. And, that first deal always feels like an out-of-body experience, right? When somebody's actually getting ready to sign the paperwork. So I got that deal. That was actually the 3rd deal that closed. The next one I contracted.
How much did you make that one?
Like $8,000. Again, this is 2009. So $8,000 was a lot of money back then.
I have a question. How long was that window of when you started going and looking for the deal and when you actually closed on the deal?
We contracted them within a month. They closed within 2 months. We were pretty quick, man. We were like, it was all we did. This wasn't like, I'm going to go send 3 postcards this week. Like, this was what we were doing. Yeah.
But you had nothing from the moment that you got there until the moment that deal closed.
0. Yeah. No, it had to happen, man. It had to happen. Like, it was that, or I was going to have to go find a job at Harbor Freight or something.
Yes. And you said at the beginning, you're like, hey, I'm not sending a ton of postcards because we don't have that kind of money. You had $5,000 to your name. I wanted to clarify, you did say you were sending postcards, but the difference is you were sending them to your driving for dollars list, right? So that's like a smaller, more targeted list.
Super targeted.
Sending a postcard to like a giant list. And so that's what you meant if you went driving for dollars.
Yeah.
And you did use the postcards that way.
Right. And to me, and again, I've mailed and called and texted millions of people in the last 13, 14 years. A driving for dollars list is the best list, hands down. I'll put it against any list any day. Why? Because here's my options. I can go to List Source, PropStream, Flipwire, PropWire, whatever, all those things. And I can pull a list of people who might be motivated to sell. Death, divorce, taxes, absentee owner, tenant issues, right? Whatever that is. So, when we're pulling those lists, we're looking for people who maybe, have an indicator that they might want to sell. But none of that is as good as me standing in front of them. Yeah.
What was your indicators?
So this is why I love driving for dollars, is because I love to stand in front of that house and go, well, this thing's vacant. This thing looks like it needs some work. Or, hey, this looks like it has tenants and it's a dump. Right? Maybe the landlord would be interested in selling this thing. So those, I feel like they have a much higher quality. It's a higher quality lead where you're more likely to get somebody to respond. So for me, I'll put driving for dollars over every list every day. And it bothers me too in some of these Facebook groups where some of these gurus get real cocky and they're like, that's stupid. Nobody should drive for dollars. I'm like, dude, I would go back to driving for dollars in 1 minute if I lost all of my stuff, Yep.
Do you do any driving for dollars now?
I don't, man. I mean, I drive around all the time, but I really don't. We're so busy with our transactions company. We really don't wholesale a whole lot anymore. Very small, kind of one-off. If somebody in our town has something, we have a great list, so we can get it moved for them. Yeah, but here's a cool thing that the first true wholesale deal that actually closed was the second one we contracted. I was driving around, and there was this old house, and it had a for rent sign in front. So I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let me call and see what's going on. So I would call for rent signs, and the way I would talk to the seller or the owner, kind of a choose your own adventure sort of thing. So I would call up and I would say, hey Ryan, hey, I'm over here at 123 Main Street. I see that you've got this house for rent. Is it still available? Yes or no, right? If you say no, my question is, oh, okay, great. Are you looking for any more houses because I have some in this area? If you say, yes, it is still available, oh, fantastic. How long has it been available, right? So I want to make sure that every call that I have, I'm able to squeeze some juice out of that call, right? So no matter what you say, like I have a place to go with them. So yeah, it's still available. Fantastic. What can you tell me about it? Cool. And I might say, hey, Ryan, how long has it been available? If you're like,
3 months.
3 months. Hey, let me ask you a question, man. I'm actually interested in buying a property. Would you be interested in selling it? Right? So no matter what you say, I've got some place that I want to go. If you're like, no, it's only been, available 3 days and I've gotten like 50 calls. Oh, cool. Sounds like you're a serious investor. Are you looking for more deals? Right? So very important to understand, like kind of game or chess that conversation all the way out, because you don't want to go, oh yeah, you're getting a lot of calls. Okay, click. Right? Because they either want to sell, they want to rent, or they want to buy some more, right? It's one of those three things. So, that's kind of a foundational thing for us. We make sure that every time, whether it's acquisitions or dispositions, whenever we get somebody on the phone, like, we want to run that conversation all the way to the ground. Yeah.
So how many of those 1,600 deals were wholesale deals? I know you said you've moved over to your transaction coordinating company now, which I do want to talk about.
Yeah. No, those 1,600 were all our deals. There were some rehabs in there. We've probably done a couple dozen rehabs. We bought over 100 rental properties, but the vast majority of them were wholesale deals, that like 95%.
Gotcha. And so you still manage you have rental properties now?
I managed them until about 2 years ago, because like all dumb investors, like nobody could do it better than me. And finally what happened was we were nationwide. We were wholesaling at, this huge clip. And I just got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I was becoming a bad landlord, right? Where tenants would call me and, hey, my air conditioner's out. I would call my AC guy. Yeah, I'll take care of it. And then 4 days later, the tenant calls me screaming, like, nobody ever came, because I just didn't have the time to follow up on it. So interesting, I called 2 property managers in our town that I liked and trusted and had them come in and look at our portfolio. And both of them were like, hey, we can get you between 9 and 11 grand more per month. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing that bad of a job managing my properties. Because again, like anybody, there's only so many balls you can keep up in the air at one time. So I immediately turned them over to them, and it's been fantastic. My portfolio is making more money, and I don't have to deal with it every day.
Please open up your podcast app right now and leave us a review and let us know what you thought of this episode. It means so much because the reviews help us get in front of more people. And the more people we can get in front of, the more we can help them achieve financial freedom. And we also get more energy to put more content out like this to help you. So by leaving us a review, it will give you more content to come to help you along on your journey. Thank you so much. Gotcha. That's smart. I'm glad it's worked out well for you. And speaking of partners, I'm curious, on the wholesale deals specifically, did you ever partner with somebody there? Because I know a lot of people, they're brand new and they don't know what they're doing. And so they feel more comfort in partnering with somebody. But I think the biggest red flag is they partner with somebody that also doesn't have experience, or they'll partner with somebody who does have experience, but they don't really like write down what their agreements are. And so those end up in kind of a bad situation.
So man, it's almost like my life. So I've actually had 4 partnerships because I'm so dumb. I need to keep getting poked in the eye with a fork. Some of them have ended well. Some of them have ended horrifically. Yeah, I don't recommend partnerships. Here's typically for me, and I'll kind of project that onto other people, that the reason people partner is because they feel like there's something they can't do that somebody else can come in and do better, right? So maybe it's, they can do payroll, or they can go get bank loans, or they can, whatever, right? Whatever it is you feel like you're insecure about. And the truth is that person rarely is ever going to come in and fulfill all of those things. Partnerships are very difficult because it's kind of like a marriage without the good parts, right? So in a partnership, two people have to be in lockstep, kind of pair like rails of a train track, right? You have to be going in the same direction. And eventually what's going to happen in most partnerships is at some point, one person's going to want to veer off a little bit and do something a little different, right? So for me, again, my superpowers were very focused, right? If we're wholesaling, we're freaking wholesaling. This is what we're doing. And one person's like, hey, I want to do storage units, right? Not a bad thing, but just now you're trying to go in two different directions, and now you're splitting your resources, and it gets to be very challenging. So I'm of the mind it's far cheaper to hire somebody hourly than to give up 50% of your equity.
Yeah, I think that's true, and been my experience too. I do have one business partner that's persisted since 2016, and that's been great, but I can't imagine having more. That would make things complicated. And I think one reason why me and my partner have been successful, is we wrote things down at the very beginning. So it was like really clear what happens if we disagree, and who owns what part of the business. And also we were friends for like 10 years before that. So it wasn't like we were getting to know each other. You know what I mean? We had worked together on little projects for quite a while.
Right. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody. You two people, you're like, oh, we can do this together. You'll do half, I'll do half. But yeah, you don't want to deal with the bad stuff, right? It's like premarital counseling, right? Both of my kids got married, and we made sure that they did premarital counseling, just because somebody's got to ask the tough questions, right? Somebody has to ask, how are you going to raise your kids? What religion? What is it that you believe in? How are you going to split it up? Like, somebody has to have an answer for those questions, because if not, when you get to the end, man, it can be ugly and a lot of hurt feelings. And, I've been through it a few times, and a couple of them have gone okay, very smooth. A couple of them have been pretty ugly and cost me a lot of money to get out of. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, now that you don't have any partners, what's investing allowed you to do that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do?
Man, I'll tell you, being an investor, here's what I'll tell you, right? It is not all Rolexes and Lambos, right? There are days that it's going to be tough. There are days where you have to really be focused and really, like, you're going to struggle. Right. I tell people, 70% of the time it's going to feel like you're getting hit by a bus. But man, the 30% of the time when it works like that, the payoff is so good. We've been able to live a life that probably we have no right to. We've been able to travel the world and just go see a lot of things and have great experiences. And, we now have the time we want to bounce and go see our grandson. We can go do that. We can travel. It's been an amazing life. The thing that I would tell most people is, in the beginning, it's hard, right? You don't, wholesaling works, or investing works, and maybe you haven't done that first deal yet. So it's not in your brain. You don't have that proof of concept yet in your brain that it will work, but just don't quit. Like, I promise you, getting on the other side of that it's amazing once it starts working and you're cashing those checks.
So I guess you're not a Rolex or a Lambo guy. Where have you traveled?
I am actually a Rolex guy, but I'm far too big to be squeezing into a Lambo. I'd be poured in there and crawling out on my hands and knees. But yeah, I have a sub, and I'm getting ready to buy a GMT, I think.
What's a GMT? Oh, is that one of the Rolex models?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a Submariner, and yeah, I'm going to upgrade here before the end of the year. I have two boys, so I figure I have to have two. That's why I tell my wife I need two Rolexes in case anything happens. They both get one.
There you
That's
go.
the story I'm going with. Yeah.
What's your favorite part of
the Rolex train yet? I have not seen the appeal. If they had a digital one,
yeah,
then maybe
that's an Apple Watch, man. You want an Apple Watch?
Yeah, I know.
You know what? Is it a dopey thing? Yeah. Does it make you feel good, like you've accomplished something when you wear it? Yeah. Maybe that's a generational thing, right? Like, I'm 50, so I don't know. Just feels good to wear it, But it is, it's literally just a thing. We were having this conversation on our office yesterday, like getting the thing, whatever it is, whether it's the fancy car, fancy house, fancy watch, fancy trip, like, it's not as good as the journey to get there. You know what I mean? So.
Where's your favorite place that you've traveled?
Oh, man. I love, like, Paris and Amsterdam. Those are probably two of my favorite places. As far as unique places, China, we spent a month there. Fascinating place to spend time. So different than my perceptions of going there. I thought everybody was going to hate us. And, the two places I've been in the world where people embraced Americans the most, weirdly enough, was China and Cuba. People never believe it, but they all just wanted to come over and speak English to us and do like thumbs up and the peace sign and take pictures and test out their English. Didn't love England, the UK. Didn't love it, but
the food's not crazy good.
It really wasn't. Ireland was awesome. I was surprised. I didn't expect it to be good. Prague, Budapest, amazing. Dubai. So I was going to say so cool, but it's the hottest of hot places I've ever been.
How do you do that? Yeah. So for those listening, they may want to travel to all these cool places. But they're also kind of a solo entrepreneur. They're trying to do this for their first time. And so like what level do you have to be at to really get that freedom in order to go take a trip like that, would you say?
I tell you, so I had an early mentor early on. Back when I was in Florida, this is the guy who taught us wholesaling, back in like 2004. And then I tried it and it couldn't work. But one of the interesting things he did is he had this whiteboard and he said, okay, let's see what you want to live $1 million lifestyle? Great. Let's write it on the board. Let's see what it's going to cost. Great. You want a $1 million house? Back then, maybe $5,000 a month and a mortgage. Oh, you want a Lambo? You want that? Whatever that $1 million lifestyle is. And it was like $15,000 a month. He's like, okay, so go do 2 wholesale deals. Like that. If you want that lifestyle, just figure out what is that going to cost? How many deals do you have to do? And here's my thing has always been like my wife would say, I want this or I want to do that or I want to do. I'm like, great, let's go do one more deal. One more deal. Like you can go to Europe for 3 weeks on 20 grand. Go do one more deal. That's it. That's the answer. And that's the difference between entrepreneurs and kind of people that work for an hourly thing. Is entrepreneurs are like, okay, well, how do I do it? Oh, it's just one more deal. Great. Let's go do it. No problem. Right. So that's how we've always looked at vacations and doing the things that we wanted to do. Oh, you want to buy a new house? Great. Okay. We need to do this, this, and this, and maybe 2 more deals for the down payment. Right. That's all it is. So that's how I view it. And it's much simpler than, how can I do something instead of I can't do that or I can't afford it.
Right. It's such a better mindset to be in because you don't feel restricted.
And literally as an investor, make as much as you want. Like just drive for dollars, go drive for 2 more hours a day for a week and you'll find one more deal, right? Like if I lost everything today, it is 10:34. By 5 o'clock, I will go out and find a deal. Like how motivated are you? Right?
I want to go find a deal right now.
Yeah, dude. If somebody said to you, God forbid, I'm holding, your mother hostage, and if you don't have a deal by 5 o'clock, she's cooked, right? And I know that's a horrible thing to say. You go out and find yourself a deal by 5. I promise you, right? So now the question is just how motivated are you? If you're kind of thinking about it and you're talking about it and you don't ever leave the house, you're busy, I don't know, doing whatever, watching Instagram, then you're not going to get a deal. You got to go out and take action. Just go do it,
So as we round out the episode, I've got a couple more questions for you. As a huge Star Wars and Marvel fan, which I know you are, what have you thought about the just insane amount of content that we've seen through those in the last few years?
Yes. So it's funny because, recently they've had the articles that they're gonna pull it back a little bit. I love it. I love it. I watch all of it, all the Star Wars stuff, all the Marvels. Like I don't go out and drink, I don't do a lot of crazy stuff. I go home and I'm Disney Plus at night, right? I've never seen a day where I don't go home and I'm on TNT and I just have like last night I had the first Avengers movie kind of playing in the background. So I love all of those movies. It's a great escape. I love it, but I can definitely see where, people are like, there's just so much you don't know what's important to watch anymore. And they're not all going to be awesome, right? Like some are going to be better than others. They try to make them, all the shows for a variety of the audience. I haven't loved the last 3 Star Wars movies. I'll be honest with you. Didn't love them at all. Wish they could wipe them out. But the Mando universe, the Mandalorian and all that stuff has been fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. Very excited for Ahsoka that's coming out. I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I love The Mandalorian, and Andor, I think, was another show that
you know what? Was it good? I tell you, I started it once, and I think I was tired one night, and I didn't make it through. And then I tried watching it on a flight. That didn't work. And then I think I've tried to get into it 2 or 3 times, but everybody says it's really good. I just need to, I guess, get past the first or second episode.
Yeah. All right. I have another 2 questions, actually. Somebody who's just starting out in wholesaling, like, what would your advice be to them?
Well, so we're going to assume you're in wholesaling. You got to find leads, right? So, I'll see a lot of people, and I try to be active in Facebook groups where I can. I went out and got 3 deals or 3 houses today or 10 houses today, and nobody's answering me when I call them. I'm like, well, you need 100, and then tomorrow you need to go get 100 more, and then you need 100 the next day or 50 the next day, right? But you need to fill that funnel with as many opportunities to get a deal as you possibly can. So again, how many can you get, right? Can you go out today and make a list of 200 houses? Yeah, absolutely. Probably in 3 or 4 hours, right? Now, not every area of town you're going to be able to do that in, right? You're going to get the nice suburbs where it's going to be a little bit harder because there's going to be less vacant houses. But if you go into maybe the inner city part of your town, that's going to be very easy to do. And, I would caution people. I see some investors who are like, ooh, I don't want a house over there. Okay, like I get it, but I've made a lot of money in those areas. Why? Because there's a lot of landlords who like to buy inexpensive properties down there that will rent for, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 a month. So like if you're looking for low-hanging fruit, that's the place where I would start. It's going to be far easier to wholesale a $70,000 house than a $600,000 house, right? So start in the bread and butter rental areas and go find some vacant houses. There's a lot of vacant houses out there.
I think that's really good advice, is in the bread and butter rental areas.
Yeah.
That just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, because you need proof of concept. You got to get out of the gates quick, right? Don't try to do the most complicated thing. And also, something else that I see a lot is people like, oh, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to recreate the wheel. Dude, we buy houses. The reason everybody uses We Buy Houses is because it works. If you want to get fancy, go I Buy Houses, right? Like yellow signs with black writing. If you're going to put out bandit signs, put out bandit signs. But driving for dollars works. That's why every one of us has done it. And it proves time and time and time again to work. And DealMachine has done nothing but just help people do that.
One thing I'll say on the opposite end of the spectrum is on Indianapolis, we have the opposite problem where I think people will go look where all the properties are run down and they have trouble wholesaling them because even if they're in perfect shape, they're worth nothing, right?
So there are some, yeah.
Kind of find a sweet spot.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. We've made a couple mistakes. Like when we first started going nationwide, I tell people we found a lot of ways to lose money. And one of them was we went to Birmingham and we went to St. Louis. Birmingham is just, I've never seen a place loaded up with so many vacant tax deed houses where it becomes a supply and demand issue, right? Where there's so much supply that there's zero demand. And I don't know if you've ever been to St. Louis, but there are like 20 square blocks of St. Louis that is as much of a war zone as I've ever seen in my life. And like, I feel like I'm pretty brave. I've wholesaled in a lot of areas. Boy, I wouldn't bring my car to a complete stop at some of those stop signs because it was a little dicey. There are definitely some exceptions for sure. But that's why, if you're new to an area, you don't know, join a RIA and they'll tell you.
Yeah. So again, if you don't know where that area is, in DealMachine, I highlight properties that are assessed $50,000 and over. And nice. So I tell my drivers, if less than half of the neighborhood is highlighted, then don't go there. Just stay away from there. So the other
question, you've added so many features over the years. It's just the app just keeps getting better and better and better. Man. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. The one thing I did want to end on too was I know you have a transaction coordinating company, and I'm curious, like, who is that for? Because you wouldn't use that when you were just getting your first deal, right? You'd probably help.
Maybe not your very first deal. So what we do, we're the nation's largest virtual transaction coordination company, and what that means is our goal is we want to be your back office for all the wholesalers and investors in the country. And we've grown at just this amazing clip. We grew 34% last month. We're probably like in the early days of you where you started getting traction and you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. It's growing so much. But essentially what we want, because let's be honest, most people that are wholesalers and entrepreneurs, they're not like really great paperwork people. They're kind of like hustlers. Let's go out and let's just do stuff. Let's make some action going. Let's get some momentum. The part that they're not great at, and the part that they did not get into this business to do, was to learn about title work and monument of title and how to solve missing trust problems and what do I do when there's a dead person, and all of those types of things. And what happens is, because they don't understand how to do that, they have a high fail rate on their deals because they don't understand how to get them through closing. Also, to most people, including me, working through transactions just feels like you're walking through quicksand, right? Dealing with the title company and gathering documents, and you thought you had everything, but go back and get something else. So what we do as for ezREI Closings is we will take all of that off your plate. Literally, you get your contract with Mrs. Smith, upload it to me, you're done. My team will call Mrs. Smith and say, hey, Mrs. Smith, this is Hannah. I'm working with David on your property over at 123 Main Street. Mrs. Smith, I'm going to be your point of contact from here all the way till closing. I need to collect some documents for the title company so we can get you paid just as quick as possible. Do you have just a minute, right? So you're done. You've got your contract. Go out and worry about selling your deal. We will take care of collecting all the documentation that the title company is going to need. And sometimes that's easy. Sometimes it's very complicated, right? Depending on our deal. And then the same thing when you have your buyer, give me that contract. I'll call Ryan and say, hey, Ryan, I'm working with David on 123 Main Street. Looks like you're buying it. Hey, man, you're closing this in your LLC. I need to get your LLC docs, and you're using Longhorn Financial for hard money. Hey, who's that contact? So I can get that to the title company. And what we want to do is we want to keep you out of the weeds. I want you out there in the field working on your marketing, getting your next deal with a seller, and then selling that deal to your end buyer. And eventually what happens is we're going to spin the wheel of your company faster and faster, because our whole mission is let's compress time, right? Let's get you paid quicker. So that's what we do.
Amazing. And so you guys can check that out at ezREIclosings.com.
REI Closings.
Oh, REI Closings. Gotcha.
That's okay.
I'm reading off your hat, which is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, we can put something in the notes here underneath. But yeah, so we've really been able to help a lot of people go from that 2, 3, 4 deals a month to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we've got some kind of mega wholesale companies that are doing 15 to 20 a month as well. We're coming up on $100 million in transactions. Last year, we did $14 million in assignment fees for our clients. So we do a lot of deals. We done over the first year was 1,221 files.
Gotcha. So, wow, that's a lot. Congratulations on the 34% growth last month too. That's pretty mind blowing. So you guys must be doing a good job.
It was. I had to check the math 3 times because I couldn't believe it.
Well, guys, make sure you follow David on Instagram, David Olds REI. And I'm sure if you guys have questions for him, he'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much,
absolutely.
David.
Good message.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You bet. I'm honored to be here with you guys.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.